we would like to start with pantun. Seri berlipat, seri pinang, seri lagi pulang terpusat. Pemanis kata selamat datang, awal bismillah. Debah candi, siku melampung, datang bertamu, untung melati. Pilih mudik, kembali berkampung. Menjana ilmu, menjalin. Welcome to Jalinan Budi. Second for 2023, I was informed by the coordinator, Prof. Sana. For today, we will be talking about language development among Malay bilingual children in Malaysia, implications for education and language intervention by Dr. Rugaya Raza, Faculty of Social Science and Liberal Arts, UCSI University, Malaysia. Before I begin, I would like to invite ALC, Prof. Mukhlis, to give few words, please.
Everyone, thank you for your presence at this today's Jalinan Budi seminar. Initially, I thought that it's going to be in Malay, but there are many people who are interested, but non-speakers of Malay, so Prof. Rugaya has kindly consented to present. So we are most fortunate today to have Prof. Rugaya Raza from University in KL. UCSI. No, that's UCSI. Yeah. So okay. So the way to pronounce this is to spell out the letters. So it's not. It's not the youth acronym. Right. Prof. Rugaya Raza is here together with Prof. Liwei as consultants for our research project headed by Dr. Beth O'Brien, for which I'm also the for the project. It's called Growth in Bilingual Bilingual Proficiency, Experiential Individual, Environmental, Experiential, and Individual Factors. And so we are fortunate to have both Professor Liwei and Professor Rugaya 5 days, 4 days from today until Thursday, to help us go through the data that we've completed so far and to provide us with direction. Prof. Rugaya was invited especially for the sub-project which involves Malay bilingual students. So we are we are looking forward to have discussions with her. She just arrived yesterday, and today is this morning is the first appointment to deliver a talk at today's seminar. And Prof. Rugaya, I've known her not personally, but through another colleague, Dr. Mohamed, whose PhD supervisors are also the external examiner for Prof. Rugaya. So there's this mutual link. And Prof. Rugaya is well known for her work in psycholinguistics, clinical psycholinguistics. We just had a chat just now of how, for us PhD graduates, we are like PhD nomads, moving from one expertise to another, constantly develop expertise in areas that we're not originally meant to be, but it's always related to our primary. And so I wouldn't have to take a long time, so I'll just pass on to the idea.
Thank you, ALC, for that short opening speech. Let's talk a little bit more about Dr. Rugaya. She's a professor and deputy dean at the Faculty of Social Science and Liberal Arts, UCSI University. I googled, and UCSI is actually UCSI stands for University College Rugaya International, and I googled again, and it says it's one of the top private universities in KL. But then Google didn't say this, but Dr. Rugaya said this is number 2. Okay, still one of the top. So Google is not wrong. Her work in academia spans more than 36 years, about my age. She worked at UKM for 21 years. So that's the thing. We always like to make sure that when it comes to Malaysia, it's UC, it's UKM, then UCSI. When you say UXI, that's okay. No, we learned something new today. For 31 years, she was there. She's the founder of Clinical Linguistics Postgraduate Program in 2007 in UKM. Her areas of expertise include psycholinguistics, multilingualism, and clinical linguistics. She's the author of local language assessment tools such as MPLAT, Malay BNT, Malay LARSP. I don't know what these all are, but I'm pretty sure she will help us along and explain to us, because this is very good because it's an assessment tool for speech language therapy. The work on the language development among typically developing bilingual, multilingual children, language acquisition among atypical developing children, and the language difficulties of adults with aphasia are widely published in high-impact journals. She is also a recipient of the Distinguished Fulbright Visiting Scholar Award in 2006. And I was actually asked by the program leader for Zalinan Budi to be the moderator for this morning, and I instantly said yes, because it's always good to meet someone and listen for something new, even though this is the recess period, and it brings me away from the work that I normally do, which is, I don't know what, but it is actually just to get some new input, yeah, Dr. Gogayat. And with that, with the title of Language Development Among Malay Bilingual Children in Malaysia, Implications for Education and Language Intervention, I present to you, Dr. Gogayat.
I'll sit. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala thanks to Allah for allowing us to be here, allowing me to come from Malaysia. It was a good flight. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Dr. Aidil, for the introduction. But I'm just going to add a little bit that I started off as to be an English teacher. So I did English literature education, and then Masters in Applied Linguistics, PhD Theoretical Linguistics, was at UM with Jamal, my student, Academy Pengajar Melayu. So I'm like, I was informing Mukhlis that we are like putting on new skills at every place that we are at. So was an armchair linguist until I was invited to come and work at University Kebangsaan Malaysia, National University of Malaysia, where me and another colleague teach future speech language therapists linguistics, because whatever they were doing, the material is linguistics. So we taught them linguistics. And that's how I came upon clinical linguistics, that I found that they don't have enough tools and to assess the population. And assessing is their bread and butter. So what they're doing subjective assessment. So that was what I saw my role was. After retirement from University Kebangsaan Malaysia, I had to retool again. So now I'm in Faculty of Social Science under Department of Education. But it's okay. We just continue with the work that we do. And so thank you so much for inviting me to Beth to the project and to this. So today I thought I thought about the audience, and I thought maybe just focus on Malay bilingual children. So I point this to here or there. Okay. So this is language development among Malay children. I was thinking of bilingual children and implication in terms of education and language intervention. So, so basically, today we're going to talk about bilingualism, the categories of bilingual stimulation, and it touches upon age repetition, effect, efficiency, and frequency. Then we talk about sentence repetition, which is the task that we do for bilingual children. Then we also will look, so we're going to like going on a tour. We are going by DLD. DLD is developmental language service, where we will present study that for Malay by DLD, Malay children with DLD. And we see that Malay in that study functions like a diagnose, and it affects, that's how the children see it, and that's how they produce it. So as you can see that I'm talking about typically developing children by bilingualism, sentence repetition, and then I go into DLD, is children with communication disorder. The thing that connects them together is the tool, because when we do the tool, which is a Malay preschool language assessment tool, nilaian bahasa kanak-kanak. The tool will be based on normative score. That is tested on about 5 to 9 children, Malay as their native language, in Kuala Lumpur, Selangor, and also in Kelantan, rural and urban. And we came up with a tool that now can identify children, can screen children for at risk, and also diagnostic. That means speech therapists can take it and determine how severe is the disorder. We'll talk about the indication. So just like Malaysia is, as we know, 100 languages, 32.7 million, with multi-ethnic, there's about 300 plus speech language therapists. So we're really underserved. At least you can see that we are, different races. So also noted that Malay, some people say Malay are monolingual, but to me Malays, I don't think Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, we have monolinguals. It's really hard to find unless you go into the hinterlands, pedalaman kan, and then you find someone who was born there, grew up there, settled down, never really lived outside. Then maybe, but then if you talk about diagnosia, the Malay dialects are also diagnosed. So for me, a Malay is bilingual, but of course the Chinese in Malaysia are multilingual. So when we talk about bilingualism, multilingualism in South Asia, it is a term just different from what is in the West. We do a lot of code mixing and code switching, and the mainstream society is multilingual, right? So this is in contrast to countries in the West, where the mainstream is monolingual, and the marginalized people or the immigrants are the multilingual. So our model of multilingualism is very interesting. And then when we talk about second language or language deficit, so sometimes when we get a child who has language deficit, and then we have to test them in all the languages that they know. So because we want to know whether it is the impairment is based on learning a second language, or he is really disordered. So if he is learning second language issue, that means he's just learning a second language and having no problem, because in his native language he's okay, right? However, if you have a disordered child, the evidence of impairment will be apparent in all languages that he knows, right? So therefore, the literature has shown that when we test a child either in school or in clinic, we need to test the child in all the languages that we know, so that you know whether some language they understand, some language they speak, speak a little, some language are quite dominant. So we want to see which languages are dominant for a child. So the research has shown that bilingual, the language abilities of the bilingual children are similar to monolingual children, although there are variations, and factors such as language domination, language dominance, language exposure. Language exposure means how often are they exposed to the language in terms of using and also listening to it, and language input by the home environment. And it's very important in looking at monolingual and bilingual. And usually bilingual speakers, they are typically possessing stronger and weaker traits in their language repertoire. So they will use the more dominant language with greater vocabulary, longer sentences, and higher proficiency. So when we look at Chan Abdullah 2015, it's a good paper which traced the development of bilingualism and bilingual education in Malaysia. So as you can see, this is like a history of the education system in Malaysia. So we have the pre-independence and pre-independence where the schools, we have Malay schools, we have vernacular schools and English schools. But predominantly, when I was at school in the 60s, I was learning in English. And then come independence, that still retained, but we now affirm that our official languages are Malay and English. So during this time when I was in primary going into secondary, I was English and then switched to Malay. We changed bahasa Melayu to bahasa Malaysia supaya semangat kenegaraan tu lebih. Kalau bahasa Malaysia tu Malaysia, bukan Melayu, bukan untuk orang Melayu, untuk orang Malaysia. Okay, so then in this era, 2003, 2012, the then Prime Minister felt that our development in the field of science and technology is a bit ketinggalan lah, a bit not up to date. So he introduced the policy of teaching of math in English, PPS. So if you are a science student, you will have 7 to 9 subjects in English. Maths, biology, chemistry, physics, maths tadi, modern maths, and maths, technological learning competence. The students were okay. My son was part of this group, but unfortunately the teachers were not ready. The teachers were not ready to actually teach. And the government actually gave them a lot of technological aids, iPad, projectors in schools, to, so that they can use the materials in the internet. But there was a big problem because then the urban and the rural children not performing good. The rural children are mostly Malay speaking, right? So then we revert back to in Malay, maths and science Malay, right? But however, the parents in the urban areas are not happy with that. They feel that the future is English. They want their children to be able to function, get a higher degree outside Malaysia. So they appeal or they fight for dual language program. So dual language program is where for certain urban schools they can apply to teach PPSMI again, where maths and science and English. So now so we have the selected schools in the urban area doing DLP. If that's the case, then the whole school is doing DLP, and then the rest of the government schools are doing Malay. And of course, in 2013, 2005, we came out with the education stream, where we say that we're going to strengthen Bahasa Melayu, Bahasa Malaysia, but yet not neglecting. Government wants the students, our future leaders and population to be equally bilingual. So this is the according to Chan. So in the study that she did, she surveyed 39 secondary school teachers, and 38.5 taught Malay, about 5% taught English as a subject, and they asked teachers about their teachers' perception on usefulness of bilingual education. So not 53% very quite positive, 41% moderate, and negative or not useful English. The degree of bilingualism among students, you can see that moderately at 3%, actually 35% for high. So the students keep favorable bilingualism. What about teachers' attitude towards student bilingualism? 43% moderate, perception, teachers' perception of Malay is high. English is moderate. There is okay. This is another study that we did for this. I want to show the age of acquisition effect in 7 languages, but Malay is one of them. So age of acquisition is basically an estimation of at what age a particular word is acquired. So we ask people, adults, to actually tell us at what age did they remember learning a word. So it was through a cross-linguistic lexical tool, a naming task. Naming task means we give them pictures and they will both name the action that's happening in the picture. And then from that, we then take the material for the AOA study. So, so we ask for each word, can you estimate the age at which you think you learned this word? So 7 languages, including Malay. And the findings suggest that there is a relatively universal order of word acquisition across a variety of languages. We had done 27 languages before this. Then this is the second round of data. And they find that close language families had the highest correlation. Malay, being a family of Austronesian languages, had a relatively low coefficient. And in general, people are reporting in the study that they learn words at roughly between 1 to 7 years old. And the order is moderately to high correlated across all languages. This supports the conclusion that the early words are acquired in similar order across a range of languages. And so let's see this. Okay, so we looked at the language acquisition data. Now we look at Salahuddin Hasriati. She talked about categories of bilingualism. She did a survey on undergrad students at UKM, and she looked at age of acquisition, proficiency, and CO. And she found that the AOA, the age of acquisition, can influence proficiency and frequency of use as adult. And early acquisition leads to greater proficiency and greater use in the language. So this is very, you will see later that it is very important for teaching or intervention. Yeah? She also, this is from her. So this is order at which languages are learned. So the most percent is actually the Malay language first, and then the English language. And then second is this one, the lighter blue, equal, both Malay and then you have only 5% where English first and then later Malay language. This is from the undergraduates talking about their experience. Actually, in Malaysia, increasingly, parents are very inclined to speak English at home with their children because they want their child to like if you go to supermarkets, listening to parents with their little kids. Then this is like, then categorizes based on that study, that data. She said that we can have the different like Malay since birth, where you later you become late bilingual, Malay, and then English acquired after that. Malay before school, but after English, quite dominant because as an adult you both. Malay during school after English, passive bilinguals where they acquired English first, frequently use English, receptive or passive Malay. That means their Malay is not dominant. Better is speaking and writing in English. Poor language Malay. Simultaneously means they are exposing using English So you have the different categories. This is showing that bilinguals are not a straight cut. We are not straight cut. We vary from each other. So, so she says early acquisition of Malay leads to greater proficiency. And so when you have early bilinguals where English and Malay are being spoken, then you are proficient. And late bilinguals are still proficient in language. And so more frequent language use as an adult make them either dominant bilinguals or passive bilinguals. Okay. So bilingualism in Malaysia is unique based on the status of the languages. So this presents unique challenges to speech language therapists because when the children or the adult goes to the speech language therapist, they have to manage the language that the client is speaking in. So when you have a bilingual, it is the task of the speech therapist to determine which is the dominant language to work on. So then there are other issues to go with that. So we have the cross-linguistic varieties between bilinguals, like the study one, where she looked at diagnose immediately. When we are in our everyday interaction, we speak colloquially. But when we are in a formal situation, we switch to formal. But sometimes speakers find it hard to switch them, so they then transverse speaking colloquial in formal. So the children that we saw with the ALC study are actually doing diagnostic Malay. And of course, and the problem is in Malaysia and also elsewhere in Southeast Asia, the lack of local standardized system for speech therapy purposes. Because when the speech therapists assess, they need to base it on normative scores, the distribution scores, where would a child with impairment be? Jadi dia kena bandingkan dengan budak yang ada cenderung bahasa tu dengan budak-budak normal yang lain lah. Barulah dia dapat tahu sejauh mana budak cenderung bahasanya. Okay. So this is another part where I'm going to talk about tasks as a sentence repetition task and so sentence repetition task is a very simple test where you present to the children sentences in Malay, for example, and in English, and we usually find comparable constructions in both languages, and then we present the sentence to the child. He listens, and then he repeats. So there'll be like a working memory test. Remember what he heard, and then if he is familiar with the structure, we'll revert to the short memory and give you back. But it's a very it's a very sensitive. Okay, so we have the stimuli, and the stimuli consists of, we can talk about, we can put in the kosakata vocabulary. We can test them vocabulary in the sentence. And we also test them imbuhan, gandaan, manhuk. Then they will have to using their long-term, short-term working memory to give us back the sentence that they have. So of course, when you are looking at bilingual kid, he will be better in the language one. But however, function words are equally difficult for language one and also language two compared to content words. Because content words have semantics, but function words do not. So actually, function words, it will go on even after, I think they will get it by either the end of first part of primary or going into 11 or 12 years old. Okay, so we are now catching on it. This because it's very convenient. So then the variables, you each looking at the age of onset. So we have to look at the subgroup. Because when you look at bilinguals Malay, they're not the same as bilingual Chinese and bilingual Indian. But to make them comparable, we use comparable structures in those languages in terms of the meaning. So this is the scoring chart that we use. So we look at content word, function word. We look at the grammar, and then we look whether they are omitting. Very fast, very nice of minute. Okay, so in this study, we looked at 60 bilingual children in Malay preschool. They are still developing. Okay. So yeah. So using a bilingual Malay English. So this one is looking at children, they perform better in Malay than English. In terms of usually the younger kids, 4 years old, they can only pick up the content word. And then the 5-year-old, they can take content and a bit of the function words. But the 6 years old will get everything. So there are significant differences between the age groups based on the age. This is correlation between the accuracy, grammaticality, strongly correlated accuracy scores and grammaticality scores, and accuracy scores and sentence type. Sentence type are negatively correlated. That means when you look at simple sentence, compound sentence, complex sentence, they might vary. Okay, so regardless of age, all bilingual children perform similarly based on accuracy. Higher SR accuracy is 1 rather than 2. So age factor is an important factor, because when you are older, you understand better and you can teach more, and also grammatical knowledge. So this is a good test to use for language impaired children, because they have difficulty doing this test. It's not a standardized test as such, it's a criterion-based test. Then we looked at the morphosyntax analysis, where we look at the words, the word level, and the sentence. And we as I said, production of content word exceeded production of function word. And correlation analysis revealed that the word counts are strongly correlated to the accuracy scores. It's the same for Malay, it's the same for English. Content words more than function. So content word and function, and then error patterns for content word and function. The error patterns are similar. So either you're typically you are using first language or second language, content words are a problem, probably because they belong to Malay. Tend to simplify things. Then we just here looking at the errors. So the omission errors steady decrease. That means from the younger group to the older group, you can find that they are steadily better at it, so they omit less. But still, omission is the most prominent group, and the omission error of function words is more prominent. These are the, when you look at the English examples, they do the past tense, omission of auxiliary, relative that, substitution, copula B, pronouns. In Malay, as you can see, it's more like ibuhan dalam passive. They don't like the D because D is passive, used in Malay. They tend to use kena, or they tend to use the more lexicalized form of ter. Omission of D and dalam, substitution of the preposition, problems with pronouns also, and also when they do a relative clause, they don't have the relative marker. Just yang merah tu. So when you look at content words, so if you look at biri-biri, the Malay, the target word is biri-biri, they will say kambing. Gunung, they will say bukit. Bersarapan pagi, have breakfast, they will say eat. And then the aspect and the adverbs. So you can see that they are on the same semantic domain, but they do not get it quite right. For the English, you find that there is some lexical difficulty there, where the child is doing homework, I think in the picture, and then they just mention a book. Students, children, a mango looks like an apple, so they say apple. A bake in English, make. In terms of the syntactic errors, you find that oleh by and D, they will substitute. They will just or delete. They'll just say if the target is makanan itu akan dibeli oleh ayah di bandar. They'll just say makanan itu akan dibeli ayah di bandar. So this is like testing whether they will use the D, but they use this, but they delete the preposition by oleh. Substitution of passive into adversative, passive, active passive. So kucing, I think this one, kucing Ali dilanggar semalam, then you say kucing Ali kena langgar. Passive D to ter, kucing Ali terlanggar. That makes sense. So actually should be kucing Ali dilanggar later. Tapi dia biasa guna D, jadi dia guna ter, but it changes the meaning of the sentence. Omission of relativizer young or dad. Ketua polis garang itu ayah saya. Mommy baked the cake we like, not mommy baked the cake that we like. So a problem with relative clause. This is okay because in another study that we did, relative clause are structures which are acquired later by end of primary school. So no problem. But you sort of know what is the problem there. Alright, so they have so word knowledge of the production of sentences, and also the difficulty in repeating non-canonical sentences. Non-canonical, especially passive lah, passive, relative clause, this is So conclusion is that in the bilingual SR, we find that language, age and language experience are important, as the older children are really can do compared to the younger child. And they always are very creative. They will use alternative ways, simplification, suggesting that their language, grammatical knowledge is very poor. So older children are successful, they are better in L1, they do use a lot of vision. Cross-linguistic transfer happens, especially for the younger kids. Somehow, for some reason, the children are using, younger children, when they use we are using Then this is children with developmental language delay. These are children whose language is impaired, but when we do the cognitive tests, they are normal, and hearing tests are normal. So that means they are able to catch up, require lots of language by speech therapists, by family at home. But the problem is they look normal. So when they are in schools, you find children who are disruptive, they disturb other kids, they make noise, they play. They're having difficulty with the language. So our schools are language based. That's why before the child goes to school, because once the child reaches school, standard 1, all everything are language based. So that will affect them. So they fall through the cracks. When they fall through the cracks, they are always at the last class, they always at the bottom of the class, and then if they don't get through the government exams, and then their life is set up like that. So, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel that if we identify them, they can be helped. So then we looked at comprehension and production of WH questions with children like this. Language but this study, what's so interesting was the experimental group is the 15 Malay children with DLD, and then we matched them with 15 age match. Kalau umur 7 ke 9 tahun, budak yang age match ni umur dia sama, chronological age. Budak yang 15 younger to developing ni, these are the kindergartens. So they are normal. They are normal kindergartens matched with the language age of the two. So actually, what is interesting, you will see that of course the children with DLD, if they are 7 to 9, they have problem. Their language will not be at 7 or 8 or 9. They will fall back into the because of their difficulty. Yeah? So we wanted to see whether it was indeed the DLD comparable to the kindergartens and lagging behind the chronological age children. Okay, so we did scientific comprehension and production. So in Malay, as you can see, when we do questions, we have the standard Malay and the colloquial Malay. And the standard Malay is always the most option. So when you look at grammar books, they always say bila nak buat ayat tanya, kena gerakkan kata tanya tu ke depan. Then grammarians, they don't accept the WH word, which is at the base position, which has not gone for movement. However, when I did the study, my PhD study, I found that in situ is legitimate that we use all the time. So you will say siapa nangis, tarik kanak ni, tarik siapa, budak lelaki mana nangis, dia pilih budak yang mana. These are all very common things that we say as adults also, right? So yeah. So as you can see, just baseline information about these kids. So this is the DLD kid. Jadi umur dia dengan age match sama, but the language match is younger. And then we did an MPLAT scores on them, and you find that they are of course lower than the chronological age, but they are lower than the preschool. Right? They are mostly lower than the preschool. Okay. So when we look at the sentence type, we find that they have problems with young manner. So as you can see, young manner, even the kindergartens are doing better than them. Young manner subject and young manner object. In this, they are about the same as the kindergartens, but of course they are much lower than the age match. Sentence start, dari segi in situ, WH in situ tadi tu, and movement, you find that DLD, they are performing as or a bit higher than the language match. Movement also. And you can see lexical errors produced, they find that ketika kalau in situ, they do a lot of substitution. These are the errors that they do. Whereas the age match and language match, they're doing okay. So in terms of movement, they also do with, although the language match also do errors because they're younger kids. Then we look at sensitivity, specificity, and accuracy scores of the WH structure. So we found that for Malaysia, comprehension yang mana, which one subject, is difficult for very sensitive, show that the DLD kids are and they are very accurate. The same with comprehension of yang mana, which one in the object position. They are doing better than the young ones. So there is selective deficit for comprehension of WH question of which yang mana. Results between children with DLD and the younger group of language matched children. A case for delay in the language development of the DLD kids. From theoretically, we can say that there is a grammatical reduction of vocal structures. Basically, as I said, that the DLD kids are actually using local play more than the formal Malay, although they are already in school. Right. So I like to think that typical and atypical grammar are actually sides of the same, and the common denominator is the development of the grammar. But for some, like the elder kids, you focus on the grammar and you make language alive, not as like teaching, but using language in a very natural and spontaneous way, then it is good. It's just we say that there is a disruption that has occurred in the system. If given intervention, we can overcome it. Okay, then this one we're just gonna go very fast. This is actually talking about the tool that we did. So and the aim is to see whether we can use it as a screening test. To if you feel that the child is not performing as well as his friends, you can do a short test, screening test, or then later you can, if he fails, you can bring him to the speech therapist for diagnostic test. So there are 6 subtests in this: vocabulary, grammatical understanding, repetition, representation, apa itu, lain-lain, relational meaning, apa yang sama antara bola dan bulan, atau apa yang sama antara pisau dan gunting, for example, and also some literature skills. They were found to be valid tools. So now we have 3 versions of it. Actually, 2 versions of it: screening and diagnostic. So this is, I'm just gonna, it's a 3-minute. So the architecture of it is
pentuturan bahasa dan pengkaji. Alat saringan mempunyai 6 sub ujian, ya.
So basically we are looking at receptive, which is understanding; expressive, which is action. Then the component inside there is semantic, looking at kata, which is vocabulary. For the understanding part, we also look at expressive, itu lain-lain, bersama antara 2 objek. Dari segi sintaksis, kita we test the grammatical understanding, actually giving a sentence and asking the child to point to the picture which represents the sentence. So this is testing for understanding. And then we have the sentence repetition for the expressive part. Okay, and early literacy because they are preschool. So this is what we do. And then you might ask, doing the same for the difference? Yes. The subtests are the same throughout for both versions. It's just that the screening version is 1/4 of the version. And that's important for screening and cepat. But it does show whether a child is passing or failing. And then if the child fails, for them to speech language therapy. So this is the form specifically. So kalau for the diagnostic, you have divided into a form of raw score to standard score, and you can talk. Then you can see whether they are 1.5 standard. There are 2 and more television per million disordered. So in that sense, the speech therapist can see the problem and also determine which part is it the receptive or the active. Okay, this is the screening. Screening, as you can see, is just raw score, and then there will be like a score sheet. The next score is grading. So very fast. This point story. So implication. So when we look at the research, implication of knowing what is things about acquisition and proficiency and frequency of speech, then I think for teachers, we might want to promote bilingualism instead of restricting, because bilingualism is making the child actively use their language to actually use both languages. Unfortunately, for Malaysia, for example, there are still people who think that that is a colonial language, therefore they don't look at English as but I think bilingualism is the only way now in the global world. And then in speech therapy, also the speech therapists, they prefer to start with the dominant language. That's how they can manage the use of language for the child. Of course, after a certain time, I think they should start second language if the child is exposed to second language. So bilingualism is also for the therapists. Then you have the sentence repetition, where you look at how old the child is, age of onset, the use, and you can see that it improves through age and improves through grammatical knowledge and understanding of content, the isian dan kata fungsi. So we teach the grammar, focusing on the vocabulary and the use of vocabulary in sentences. We are aware of that we don't worry that the child doesn't get it, because we know from education studies that like ayat relative is hard, so they get it later. Ayat passive is hard, D is hard, they get it later, but they get the kena first through colloquial language. Functional words are harder, so don't worry about your child. If your child is not, or your student is not, getting it, they will get it once they start reading, because the academic language, the language at school when they read science and maths and stuff, that is from Malay. So once they start reading, they'll be. So promote content word before. This is what therapists do. They promote content word first before function word. And in terms of the DLD, diagnosia, sometimes in Malaysia we are very afraid of language pollution, where when you are in class, you have to speak, you have to use the language, the formal language, and you're penalized. I guess in teaching it is okay, but teachers have to also teach students transition. Maknanya, ajar diorang dalam situasi macam ni, you can speak trust, dalam perasaan, dan sebagainya, kena guna bahasa formal lah. Jadi bila kids know the distinction, then it's easier for them to transition. Actually, when we look at sometimes like when we look at kita mengajar imbuhan, teach derivation. The second language learners, they can pick up the fixation. Can pick up the fixation much better than the native speakers. Because native speakers have the colloquial version of it, so they have that baggage of not knowing the language before. Whereas the second language learners, they learn it from school, so they can pick up the formal structures better than the native speakers. So when we teach primary school, for example, it's hard to teach Wuhan, all the different kinds, and then the curriculum in Malaysia for Malay is so much more higher than English. We teach them so much sampai sintaksis pun ajar masa sekolah rendah. Mana subjek mana objek kan, so it's too linguistic based. So and then MPLAT for it's actually meant to identify a child early and to intervene early. So for teachers, you are the frontliners. If you meet this kid very early, in preschool, play school. So if you sense that a child is not performing, actually just functioning. If the child's not functioning, asking question, requesting, describing, then please get the child some help. And we should also be equipped with language developmental milestones so that we know. And of course, for the speech therapists, early identification and attention is very crucial. That means if you can intervene when the child is 4 years old compared to when the child is 7 years old, such a big difference. Okay. So, yeah.
Dr. Raya, talk on language development among Malay bilingual children in Malaysia and implications for education. I think the issue of standardization is important, and also the MPLAT, which is for early identification and intervention. And when she started off indicating that she was she taught English, in actual fact, quite a number of us here from back in the day when I started as a training teacher in '88, our first year, even though we're doing Malay language, all of us have to do English. We did full English for 1 year, and only the second year then we specialized in Malay. So I remember for practicum, I actually had to teach English, and then in the same class, I taught them Malay. So they are very confused. Sometimes they call me Cikgu, and sometimes they call me Mr. ID. As long as they don't call me Ustaz, it should be okay. But somehow or other, we have gone a way where specialization is important. And after my batch, it was 600 hours of Malay, year 1 and year 2. So the issue as we go on into bilingualism is that are we concentrating on one particular language, in that instance in Singapore, and then trying to intervene based on the use of the dominant language, while in Malaysia we see the other way around, where you are trying to go English, trying to be bilingual, especially di bandar-bandar, yeah, and of course I'm pretty sure there are political implications there too. Yeah, okay, that's my take. Okay, can we can we have questions? I think we only take for the floor, right? No online. Okay, cool. Okay, we'll start with the floor. Normal protocol, name and your question, please. Yes.
Thank you, Gaya, for that wonderful how we go about identifying typical and atypical. I just have one question at this point. So you mentioned multiple age and also age max. Do I assume correctly that the chronological age that you refer to is the chronological age of a monolingual, given that high percentage of these students are native speakers of Malay before they acquire the English. But in Singapore, there's a higher percentage of students who grow up both Malay and English, if not more. Should the chronological age be adapted to bilingual students? That means when we measure proficiency in Malay, on one hand, we measure proficiency in Malay as a monolingual, but you think it's also appropriate to measure Malay proficiency as a bilingual? So how do you address it?
Thank you, Dr. Muflis, for the question. Chronological age is based on date of birth, right? So a person can be 9 years old, and then if he's typically developing, then he is functioning okay. But when you have a child who is having difficulties, communication-wise, in terms of maybe like just now, DLD, sometimes hearing impairment, autism, then you have two. You have his chronological age, the day that he was born, and also what I call a language age. So the language age is at the point of intervention. So if he's having hearing impairment, and then we get him to use a hearing aid or do a cochlear implant, and that's the first, we call it a switch on. So after they have operated or have started using hearing aid, then the moment that person is introduced to sounds, can hear the sounds now. So that is language age. So for that kind of individual, his language age is like a baby. Start from zero. So then you will be taught how to distinguish sounds and ultimately produce sounds. So for yeah, and we always think that these people with difficulties, children with difficulties, they will be delayed. Although their sequence of acquisition might be similar, but they are much delayed than the typically developing one. So now we're looking at bilingual students. If they are typically developing, then we need to figure out from the scores, we need to test all the languages that he knows and determine which one is the dominant. But if he is simultaneously exposing and using the language at home, English and Malay, for example, then both languages are his native language. So he can actually switch, from one language to the other, no problem. Yeah. So, but if the bilingual child is atypical, so he is having difficulty, communication disorders, he's also bilingual. That means he is in a household, in a social environment where languages are spoken. So might be an extended family where the grandmother, the auntie, uncle, the cousin, they're speaking different dialects of Chinese, for example. So this child is exposed to the multilingual, multi-languages or dialects. So then before you want to do an assessment of the child, you really need to know all the languages that the child knows. And you can do BLAP. BLAP is a bilingual language ability. BLAP is from NUS, Professor Dr. Rickert Liao. She did a BLAP. So BLAP can actually be used to determine the language ability of bilingual kids. And then the other thing that we can do is parent checklist, where you ask about their bilingualism. So what do they do? What languages do they function in? What are languages exposed to them? So you can get information from the parents to determine the extent of the bilingualism. So as a teacher, we might not be having to find out in detail, but at least we are aware of it, so that we are more accommodating when children give us responses that are not in the target language. But for speech therapists, they would need to do that, and also researchers, when they study bilingual kids, typically or atypically, then they have to determine. So it's the language age. Language age is one. Then the other one for bilingualism, I think it depends on the study done by Hasriati, where you determine which comes first, and then see you have to determine how functional are they in those languages. I think, yeah. Yeah.
I have a question here online from Puan Maria. What are some examples of content words and functional words?
For Mariam, content words are basically nouns, verbs, adjectives. Those are content words. They have meaning. They have primary meaning. Yeah. They also have secondary meaning. But content words are words that we use to label things, to name an action, and also to describe attributes, adjectives can. So it's easier to learn content words because it's meaningful. I mean, the first thing,
Topical.
Topical,
Because in education we use the term topical words. So this topical.
Ketugas is function words.
Functional words are ketugas. Okay.
They basically, when we look at children acquiring language, we tend to expose them to areas of the house. Right, so kita ada bilik tidur, bilik dapur dan sebagainya. So the things that are in those places are content words lah. You know, naming, labeling. And then the function words are the glue, the words that connect the content words together. And that's when you want to indicate location, when you want to join a phrase or a sentence. Ali dan Abu ke pasar. So itu dah ada dan di situ kata hubung lah. Which is actually, if you think about it, is a higher. It carries functional meaning, which might be acquired later. But if you expose the child to reading, a lot of reading, I find that reading is really a very effective way of improving your language. So if the child is reading, then he can overcome that difficulty of content and function words. But I wouldn't worry about it. It's just that if there are too many content words, so for example, if a child is 4 years old, he's just doing nouns. That's worrying, because when he does nouns, he cannot strung a meaningful sentence. So he can just say, he can name, labeling, but he cannot combine these words. So at 4 years old, that's very worrying. Need to see the professional to help.
Because that's what we normally see. Go to preschool, preschool, we label. And I've been to homes whereby parents do label. Yeah, so that's how they will know.
I think that's the first phase of learning, first phase of language, labeling. But after that, you need to up the game and say, okay, let's do verbs. Because once you do verbs will attract the nouns. You know, when you say makan, makan apa? Makan nasi. Ibu masak lauk ikan. You know, so you have to. So when you do the verbs, definitely the nouns will come in. And then you expand on the nouns. You use adjective, kata bilangan, quantifiers, you know, and expand them. So that's how I teach my speech therapy student, that don't expect. Let's say the mom comes and say, I want my child to speak like his friends. But the mom, you need to counsel the mom and say that, okay puan, kita kena ajar dia kosakata dulu. So bila ada kosakata tu, content words and function words, and then you build on it. Then it will happen lah.
Okay, we have another question. Dr. Saidan? Okay, you go, Dr. Saidan.
Symbolism. No, it just looks nice.
Oh, yes.
It just looks good.
Is that your favorite food or something?
No, I mean, I wanted to do my PowerPoint and I saw this. Oh, this is nice.
Okay, hijau kuning from kita. For black hair.
But I do know that I recognize that when we use words inadvertently, we have symbolism behind there. There is some meaning that we want to relay through the pictures or the words that we use. That's how we use language, kan? Okay. So language acquisition. In coming out with the MPLAT, we looked at we wanted children who are Malay is their dominant language because we want to because when we do the test, we want to get the mono first and then the next stage is the bilingual. So we went to Tadika Kemas. Tadika Kemas is a government-run kindergarten. So there, and the people there are memang the children there, the parents are actually blue-collar workers. If you are diploma, it's the highest, and they live below, they are below 40 people lah, in Klang Valley. But we also went into Kelantan because one of my master student was working in Kelantan. So she looked at Kota Baru, Pekan dia, city of Kelantan in Kota Baru, and Gua Musang. So Gua Musang is a kampung, like a urban, rural area, Gua Musang, which is actually on the border of Perak and Kelantan. So we sort of like we had KL. Although in KL we do have the B40, but we also looked at other kindis yang so there's a mix of it lah. Well, if you are in urban, most parents most parents who can afford, they will not go to Tadika Kemas. They will go to private tadikas. Depending if you are wanting your child to be inculcated Islamic values, then you go to integrated like Ito Khalif, where they use English and Malay, or international kindergartens, so purely in English. So then you get bilingual kids, and actually even English is their native language. Malays, whose native language is English.
So here, basically in Singapore, as a grouping, we look at housing. So 3 bilik, 4 bilik, 2 bilik. So I think in Malaysia, we ada bandar.
Bandar, luar bandar.
Kalau luar bandar, pedalaman,
Kita ada juga miskin bandar.
miskin bandar.
Miskin bandar. At least kalau di rural, you can plant things, you can catch fish in the river and in the paddy field. But miskin bandar, you have to rely on what they earn.
So their languages will be Malay and English will be minimum. Or none at all.
Or none at all.
Okay. I go to questions online. One more. We have from I think this is Iwan. Thank you, Prof, for the enlightening lecture. What are your thoughts on a version of multilingualism where Malay has been relegated to a third or foreign language status, whereas English stand dominant and popular culture, Korean or Japanese, stands in as a choice second language? So basically in Singapore, English is dominant, and then K-pop, J-pop. I was informed by in NTU for foreign languages, number one is sign language. The third language, sign language number one, and second is Korean. So Malay is actually third, not too bad. They really want to learn Malay and is oversubscribed. But still, sign language is number one and Korean. We need to beat them. So how is it that is Malay becoming a third language, losing to Korean and English?
My first experience interacting with students from Singapore is to just in Malay teachers doing their degree in Malaya, like Jamal, Saudara Jamal, and many others. So I get to know they are very nice. You're very interactive. You're very dynamic students. You know?
They have to be.
Yes. So I had fun, but I then got talking to them, and they told me that Malay is. I asked them, what is the first language? They say English. I said, you're kidding, right? No, English is the first language. How come? I said, because the child is at home, at home. Why is, because ordinarily, conventionally, first language is mother tongue, because that's where the child is born, raised up, and so I think Singapore has a unique model. But I think the role is for the parents, because now I think, in a sense, although Malay is the official language of Singapore, it has become, I think, a heritage language.
It's a taboo word.
We shall delete that out now. It's an official and also a national language. They're one of the four.
My apologies. Okay. Yes. Well, actually, the parents. That means if the parents maintain that at home, kat rumah, kena cakap bahasa Melayu, then the kids will be strong in Malay. Tapi parents now, especially younger parents, they go for the economic value of the language. Like in Malaysia now, a lot more parents are sending kids to Chinese schools because they feel that, you know, having knowing how to speak in Mandarin would be very handy for them in the future when they work. So parents see the economic value of the language. However, itulah I kata, kalau it's just like we living in the US or UK, we still want our child to speak Malay, so we have to speak it at home.
I think in the Singapore context, even if you take into account one pandemic by ecology, with COVID, with parents having to work at home, they will use English at home more, because the whole idea of working at home is to use the language that is at work. So it might have a greater impact. We not look at it now. But what you're saying is it should be, but it's not. And I think we all know the census of 2020, 5 to 14-year-old dominant language in the Malay household is English 65%. So that is 5 to 14. So the next census in 2030, you just imagine 5 to 14, there will be an increase. So that is the concern. The parents themselves are not using it for various reasons. Okay? Also, well, we shall not go further into that because there are many issues because of the domain of usage. It's not just in education, but also within society. I think in Malaysia, it's still a linked language for religion. In Singapore, it's becoming lesser and lesser because we have chosen a certain way. So what is this with? So I think based on this question, we should be looking at how to popularize the use of the language within the popular culture. Yeah. In Malaysia, you have Siti Nurhaliza, you have Gegar Vaganza, you have this. In Singapore, we have Taufik Batisa, but he doesn't really speak Malay. He just sing in Malay. So we
have a young Malay guy.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Can speak Malay.
He must be young, he must be good looking, and then he must be able to speak good Malay and sing good Malay songs. So we are looking for these people. We have not found them yet. So I guess this popular culture is very important. Yeah, in language.
TikTok kan?
TikTok, yeah.
In Malay.
TikTok, if you can differentiate though. If you go into TikTok, not that I do, but my wife does. So she always complain, Malaysia punya TikTokers who speak in good Malay. You know this is from Kedah, this is from Perak, because the colloquial Malay that they use. Then the Singaporean will come in Singlish or a little bit of Malay, but mostly in English. So there is this identity. You don't, but there's this movement to use more Malay. Even our podcast, we're trying. It may not be, maybe in the next few years, we'll have more of it.
Itulah, going back to the presentation tadi, is age of acquisition.
Yeah.
That means the earlier the child learns using the word,
Yeah.
the better.
Yeah.
And then total use, that means we must make sure maximum or some use of Malay at home, they're exposed to using it. And total exposure lah. We need to expose.
Ours is more language and education. So I've been to a few primary schools where they have TikTok competitions for Malay language, and the students are really very good at it. Cuma dia punya Malay may not be the standard Malay, but they are allowed to play around with words. So I think that our starting point for language acquisition, as you said, would be at preschool, may not be at home, because now in Singapore preschool they get 1 hour of mother tongue language or Malay language every day. So that should be a good starting point. Maybe we'll see that in 10 years' time.
Although we are promoting bilingualism,
Yeah.
not saying that
Yeah.
don't neglect the other
Yeah.
languages, but we still need to have a sense of ownership. Because actually bahasa mencerminkan bangsa dan budaya kan. So otherwise you're like yellow inside kan.
Yeah.
So tapi yang penting tu we need to get them reading lah. Read Malay. I think reading is very important.
Yes, question from the floor. Your name, please.
I use
It's a good question. Sentence repetition is actually based on meaning. So you read the sentence to the child, and the child gets the meaning. Then to convey the meaning, he has to use the content words and the function words. So if he mispronounces things, especially the 4-year-olds, there might be a bit pronunciation issues there. We don't mind. That means as long as we recognize the word and it retains the original meaning, we will count it as 1 lah. A 0 is when they drop something and it changes the meaning, or they add something and it changes the meaning. So it's based on meaning. So in sentence repetition, it's not really we're not looking at pronunciation, or it's just them giving you back the words in the sentence. Principally, yes. If it's unchanged, it's okay. But you can't really change. You can't really change. You can't really. There's so much that you can do actually, in conveying the meaning. So can't do much. Maybe drop something or add something. That's it. You can't do very much. Not much variation in that sense. But it's a good test because it's easy to administer, and it's not yet normative based. So you can just pick up. You can email me and I'll send you the task. You can do it. Yeah. And it's very good for multilingual. I think people at NUS, they're also using SR. They're doing people at NUS this speech therapy department, I believe. They are coming up with a lot of tests which are very useful.
Okay. There are no other questions. I know there are a lot of questions online.
Balance bilingual.
Yeah, I think so. Whether the 1 hour per day at preschool is enough. I don't think it's just that 1 hour per day in preschool. It's also the community, the home plays a big part. Yeah.
Get them reading.
Yeah, and get them reading. Yeah. I think there's a movement in Singapore to publish more local Malay books and more local bilingual books, Malay and English.
We need more story for the kids. Even in Malaysia, I think we don't have enough. So we have a lot of books from the West, nursery rhymes. Kita ada ke nursery rhyme? Patut ada lah untuk kanak-kanak kan. Dia ialah what do you call? The Pupuk Mamai.
I think we have to bring that back because the lagu-lagu tradisi kita. Gunakan istilah heritage tu. But in Singapore, when we talk about heritage, is tulisan Jawi is heritage. Because kita punya dalam perlembagaan, Malay is the romanized form. So the Jawi is not included as that, so it's heritage.
Tapi sebenarnya, actually heritage, the word heritage, it should not have negative connotation, you know. But dia memang is a term that's used for people in majority monolingual, and then they use their mother tongue at home. Because of the limited use, then it's called heritage because it's also to establish the identity of the people.
The learning of mother tongue or Malay in the context of Singapore is a cultural repository. Yang fungsinya dah ditentukan as such. Okay, I think we have run out of time. So thank you very much for the presentation and also for answering all our questions. I think it has been a fruitful morning, and I thank everyone for making time coming here, and those online for staying on and asking a lot of questions. I think if you need more, need to be answered, we can forward to you and then we get your feedback on that. With that, we come to the end of our second Jalinan Budi in 2023, 2nd October. And tadi mula dengan pantun, akhir dengan pantun lah. Baru kembang bunga seroja, sudah ada orang mencuri. Besar-besar istana raja, kecil-kecil pokok sendiri. Kain berlipat dalam istana, pakaian puteri raja kayangan, sepatah nasihat ilmu berguna, jalinan budi jadi kenangan. Terima kasih.